Breaking today, King Charles may have just saved the British royal family. Now, I know some of you will say that is hyperbole, but I honestly do not believe that. If the monarch had allowed Prince Harry to stay at Buckingham Palace, despite all of his threats over the past couple of weeks, I honestly believe it could have led to the beginning of an existential crisis for the royal family. So the fact that against his own heart, against what he might say his better judgment, but with the full backing of his son, the heir to the throne, Prince William, the king this morning said, hell no, hell no. The door to Buckingham Palace is slammed in your face, Harry, and Meghan too, I think is the beginning of the reclaiming of Charles's power here. He was seen out and about in Bovington earlier today, and at the end of the day, Charles should not be having to deal with this constant nonsense, this total hysteria, this embarrassment of a son when he is conducting his service for the British public, for the Commonwealth, while undergoing treatment for terminal cancer. So we're done, Harry. The door is slammed shut. Indeed, I'd be happy if you never came back to this country again. So we're going to get into it all today. I'm going to tell you the breaking news. I'm going to tell you the journalists who have been spreading the propaganda. Goodness gracious me, it's all been kicking off over the past few hours. But first, perfect woman to have today, editor of the Royal News Network, Brittany, is with me. Brittany, first, your reaction to this breaking news today. Prince Harry announces that he's staying at Buckingham Palace, and thank God, for once, Charles puts his foot down and says no.
Harry and his team are a mess and a disaster, and it is perfectly appropriate for Charles to just tell him no. Look, we gave you plenty of time, and you couldn't come to a decision, and you kind of decide to accept last minute. And you know what? We have other plans. We have a life. Our life does not revolve around you and your needs and your drama and your toxicity and everything like that. And so, no, you know what? You didn't give us enough time. You're on your own. And I think this should be the message overall from now until the end of time. I think this whole debacle is an example of why Harry just needs to be cut off completely from the British monarchy. He's not on the line of succession. Neither are his children. He has no place. He has no purpose. He has no future here in the British monarchy. And this needs to be done because I think if they actually sever the ties more completely, they kind of can get away from the sideshow freak show that is Sussex land at this point. Harry and Meghan are just the sideshow freak attraction of the monarchy. But unfortunately, they kind of tend to drag the headlines and drag the family into their melodrama. And the only way for the family to avoid that, the British royal family, is to just cut them off and set them loose.
Freak show is the right word, Brittany. And that is why I am so angry today. Because he's acting like an out-of-control Z-list celebrity who a manager or an agent or a PR would be saying, go to rehab. Like, shut up. Go to rehab. You're destroying your own career. But this is not just some showbiz career we're talking about, Brittany. This is the future of the British royal family. You know, this matters to us. It matters to our country. It matters to the Commonwealth. It matters to the world. And this is why today is so serious. And Brittany, the other thing that people really have to wake up to, and I know everyone here on Outspoken has, you know, that's why you're here. That's why you're at the Royal News Network, because you understand you can't trust the mainstream media. But these propagandists, Brittany, apparently working within the Royal Rota, but actually just treating Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as if what they say is true, don't just have egg on their face now, Brittany. They have a whole omelette. Okay? And it's mortifying to watch people just prepared to shred what remaining credibility they had to go with this narrative. And again, you know, I always like to bring you the receipts. So I'm going to give you one example because it's an example I've spoken about a lot. Cameron Walker, who is the royal correspondent at GB News, but it's actually BFF with Omid Scobie, who set up this whole weird, creepy relationship with the Sussexes. He actually went on air this morning, Brittany, and was like leaping with excitement because he'd got the big scoop that Harry was going to be staying at Buckingham Palace. Watch this.
This regarding Prince Harry's visit to London. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker is here with us.
Yes, exclusive to GB News. Prince Harry has accepted an offer to stay at Buckingham Palace during the UK visit. This is very significant news, given just a couple of weeks ago we were told no British monarch is ever going to live there again. Prince Harry has been in a bit of limbo as to where he's going to be staying. He's been so concerned, as we know, over the security arrangements for his visits. He's not going to get taxpayer-funded protection. The offer from King Charles has been there, actually, for a number of weeks and months for Harry to stay in a royal residence when he's in the UK. Clearly, remember, Buckingham Palace, focal point of British monarchy, guarded around the clock by armed police officers, and clearly as secure a building as you can get, really, in the United Kingdom. So Harry has, indeed, as of this morning, accepted that offer to stay in the royal residence just next door, of course, to King Charles, who will be staying at Clarence House.
So he's on his own there, because no one's staying there, so he's got his own palace for his time in the UK?
He does. He has his own palace in time while he's in the UK. Just been refurbished, of course. We're in the process of being refurbished. Just a stone's throw away to go and see his father next door.
Will he see his father?
Well, we don't know. They say, though, that's a private matter. I would be so surprised if he does not make the time to see his father while he's in the UK. I know for a fact that the two of them do actually talk regularly. And that does happen over the phone.
And they may sit down and watch the game together on Saturday night?
Quite possibly.
I think selfie?
Yeah, maybe. I don't think that Harry's going to be staying in Buckingham Palace for more than a couple of days, because he's going to be in Birmingham for the Invictus Games countdown.
Okay, so this is total humiliation for GB News. You saw that report, and any sensible journalist would know by this point that believing Harry and Meghan means you are very soon going to be made to look like a fool, because they are liars. And sure enough, less than 3 hours after that breathless report from Cameron Walker, the channel's own newsreader had to come on air and admit that their scoop was a load of poppycock.
Palace aides have denied that Prince Harry will be staying at Buckingham Palace during his UK visit. GB News exclusively revealed earlier today that the Duke of Sussex had accepted King Charles's offer to stay in the monarch's official residence, something Harry's office continues to stand by. However, palace aides have now denied that the king's youngest son will be staying at the palace. It is understood Harry had initially declined an offer to reside in the residence, but later changed his mind after the deadline had passed.
So, Brittany, why this matters is because Cameron Walker then has shown he's not a journalist. I mean, trust me, I know that he used to work for me at GB News, but rather a propaganda parrot using GB News to do the bidding for the delusional Duke. I found that genuinely toe-curling stuff. But Brittany, all of these people have been warned time and again. Like, if you're still believing what the Sussexes are telling you in that little WhatsApp group, unfortunately, you're not a journalist. You're a propagandist. If you value the whole truth and nothing but the truth on these royal stories, make sure you subscribe to Outspoken right now. It allows me to work outside of the MSM and the Royal Rota.
Well, I mean, Dan, in this particular situation, like this has been such an absolute disaster on multiple levels. But Cameron Walker really just doesn't have any excuse here, because obviously we just saw a week ago how Harry and Meghan gave an entire itinerary to the press and then walked it back less than 24 hours later. And so it's at this point, especially when it comes to anything regarding this trip, any seasoned journalist would go, okay, that's great, but let me double check this with the palace at this point, because we are getting constantly different stories. And so when it came to the initial itinerary thing, I understand why people reported it, because itineraries like that generally aren't usually subject to a bunch of change, especially 24 hours later, unless something very serious happens. And so yes, I understand that initial thing. But at this point, it's been a week since then. Like, you should know at this point, you can't trust anything Harry and Meghan say. And this, in so many ways, is a critical disaster for them. Just such a series of forced errors, because now everything, like at least smart journalists, anything Harry and Meghan say is now taken with a grain of salt. Their claims of security, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because they have been known now to lie multiple times within the span of about 2 weeks here. And that you just can't trust anything, and it's such a bad look on Harry and Meghan. It destroys their reputation, and the reputational damage, I'm sure, is going to be reflected in how Hollywood treats them as well, because I think Hollywood has seen this on more of a minor scale within productions and things, but now we're seeing it at a macro scale, and they are somebody you can't trust and you can't work with because you cannot trust them to keep their word.
100% you cannot trust them, but you're right, there was no excuse in this case. Then, Brittany, what I want to do is unpick the Buckingham Palace pushback, because again, the mainstream media isn't actually giving you the full truth here, and I'll explain why, because we have this critical verdict coming tomorrow, don't we? Coming tomorrow, this critical verdict which could determine the future of not just Prince Harry's reputation, but the Daily Mail's reputation. So Rebecca English, who is the head of the Royal Rota, who is personally involved in this case, and let's be honest, is pushing the Buckingham Palace line here, left out a key part of the story, Brittany. And again, I'm going to criticize her for doing that, okay? Because she parroted the fact that Prince Harry will not stay at Buckingham Palace because he did not give the royals enough notice despite accepting the offer. Now, part of that is true. Okay, so part of this is true. So let me just go through the details here. So she says, the Duke is understood to have initially declined the King's offer on Saturday because reversing his decision, attempting to accept it just hours later. By then, however, palace officials informed him that the stay could not go ahead because the necessary staffing and hospitality arrangements were no longer in place. Amid the continuing dispute over security arrangements for his family, Charles had personally offered Harry a place to stay at Buckingham Palace. However, it emerged today that the Duke failed to accept the offer before last Friday's deadline, leaving officials with insufficient time to make the necessary preparations for his visit. Harry's team briefed preferred media outlets on Monday morning that the California-based royal would be staying at Buckingham Palace, citing direct discussions with his father. But within minutes and only hours before Harry was due to land in Britain, those claims were contradicted. Palace sources said the Duke had failed to respond in time and that it was now too late. Harry's spokesman subsequently issued an extraordinary statement expressing disappointment and accusing Buckingham Palace of withdrawing the offer at the last moment, a development that has plunged the Duke's visit into fresh turmoil. I'm aware of multiple briefings from Buckingham Palace last week suggesting that the Duke had not accepted the offer of royal accommodation at a royal residence, the spokesman said. Following Ravek's decision not to provide security for his family, the Duke spent last week making alternative security arrangements. Once those arrangements were in place, he was able to formally accept the offer of accommodation for himself over the weekend. It is therefore disappointing that the offer has now been withdrawn, with Tuesday's judgment in the Associated Newspapers Limited case cited as the reason. Okay, that's the key thing there. That's the key line, which Rebecca English was not reporting at all. They went on, however, Buckingham Palace has, however, been aware of that judgment since last Thursday. It is therefore unclear why, having formally accepted the accommodation offer, it has now been withdrawn at the last moment. Now, Brittany, that is critical. And Rebecca English was leaving out a massive part of the story, Brittany, because as soon as it became clear that the Daily Mail verdict was going to be handed down tomorrow at 2 p.m. UK time. And remember, this is a coincidence. You know, there's a lot of people who are saying, actually, this must all be planned, but the British judiciary is working independently here. So it's this really weird, unfortunate coincidence. The King was faced with a nightmare scenario, Brittany, where Prince Harry, who is planning to deliver a speech if he wins on even one of the 14 counts versus the Daily Mail, could end up delivering that speech from Buckingham Palace as if he was some type of formal member of the British royal family. So Rebecca's not being honest. Yes, of course, it was bad, the timing and everything. But fundamentally, Brittany, it was never going to fly him staying at Buckingham Palace anyway. I honestly believe, even if he had accepted the offer by the timeline that had been provided, the offer still would have been withdrawn as a result of the Daily Mail court case. The optics are just impossible in this case.
I mean, it really is a challenge here, Dan, for Charles on multiple levels. Because again, he wants to see his grandchildren. I don't even think he wants to see Harry that much. He probably just really wants to connect with his grandchildren just in case the worst should happen. And you have all this chaos, all this toxicity, everything that Harry brings to the table now, and Meghan, which it just doesn't really make it worth it for Charles. And then you have the added burden of this court case and Harry going after various publications within the British media, where the royal family tries to keep as much of a hands-off approach as possible because the papers, they have a right of free speech, and so they should be able to report on things. And so the British family knows that they need to be able to have that transparency with the press in certain instances, and Harry is throwing a grenade in that, and there is problems there as well. And you're right, if Harry won, he'd probably do his delivery from Buckingham Palace. He would probably make some sort of statement or do anything to show that,
he
hey,
could even
I'm
just
at
make a video,
Buckingham
Brittany.
Palace.
That's the
Yeah,
problem. He
I
could
mean, he
even
likes
just
doing
make a
videos.
video. And he's doing it from Buckingham Palace like it can't stand. Now, of course, you still do have some people with a straight face pretending to be reporters but operating as propagandists for Harry, one of them being Chris Shipp, the royal editor of Woke ITV, who said, today, even after everything, after all of the explanation I've just given, I'm not sure why the son of a monarch can't stand a room in Buckingham Palace when an independent judge hands down a ruling in a libel unconnected to the king. Does that mean Prince William had to live elsewhere when he sued various publishers' magazines over the years? It seems that tomorrow's High Court judgment on Harry and others' case against the publishers of the Mail has made folk nervous at the palace, concerned about the king's constitutional position. It's been deemed inappropriate to have his son stay in a royal residence. And I mean, come on, Brittany. Chris Shipp is being completely intellectually dishonest to try and compare a Prince William case where he was simply protecting the fact that Closer magazine, for example, in France, had published topless pictures of his wife. I mean, to try and compare that with Prince Harry literally attempting to bring down the entire British press at the same time as he's trying to bring down the British royal family, it's just nonsense. There is no comparison. It is apples and oranges.
It is, Dan. Harry is suing anyone and everyone who's ever, like, some of these articles go back decades. And so it's just the whole case for Harry against the Daily Mail was sort of insane in the first place. I mean, I think some people will lose, and perhaps lose quite big in this case, and have to pay a monetary settlement because they brought the articles too late. They're outside the jurisdiction of the court and everything. So we will see how this plays out. But Charles's constitutional position as well is to, let's say, reflect those freedom of speech principles that should exist there in the UK. And so his son suing the papers over frivolous reasons is not a good look for the monarch. And Charles has to think here, Harry is not constitutionally relevant, yet he is constantly dragging the British monarchy into his frivolous fights. And it's time for the monarchy to, again, sever the apron strings here, really make this separation absolutely permanent. I think Harry has proven just in these last 2 weeks that this is a necessary step. Harry is not going to change. He's getting worse, and he feels strangely entitled for a man who is utterly constitutionally irrelevant. He feels so entitled that he can leverage things to get his way, and that's just not happening. And the only way to stop that is for the British monarchy to stop that in whatever way they can, because Harry is not going to exercise any good judgment here whatsoever.
Brittany, what is really interesting is that you referred to the fact that you don't think Charles actually even wants to see Harry. That now seems to be the position firming up from Buckingham Palace. This is incredibly significant because we have another new line from within the royal rota. This is Russell Myers. He is the royal editor of the Daily Mirror, and he is reporting with some authority, Brittany, and I believe, again, this has come directly from Tobin Andre, the communications secretary at Buckingham Palace, that Charles just isn't going to see Harry because he's not going to alter the diary. Now, of course, there is the possibility, because Harry keeps claiming, my communication is directly with my father. So, okay, like, maybe there's like something personal going on there where Charles says, oh, just pop in. But the palace sort of apparatus now, Brittany, is saying no. It's like, no, you're not seen at Buckingham Palace. No, you're not even going to see your dad. Harry would obviously blame the men in grey suits. But this is what Russell Myers reports. Royal sources have described the drama surrounding the Sussexes' travel plans as tiresome, while confirming that the king has not altered plans for a range of engagements and private meetings every day next week. Palace insiders also suggested that there was irritation that Harry had failed to communicate his travel plans or send a response to the invitation of staying at Buckingham Palace. Another source said it would now be, quote, immensely difficult for Harry to arrange a meeting between the king and his son due to the last-minute changes. The king has public engagements and private meetings. This is the key thing. He's getting these private meetings in now every day of the coming week. One insider said, this whole business has become incredibly tiresome and it remains unresolved less than 24 hours before the Duke is supposed to be arriving. The king takes his public work incredibly seriously and there will be no last-minute deviations to his plan. Now, Brittany, that sounds very much to me like the palace saying it's a no. So only Charles can personally overrule it now. We know Camilla is saying don't see William. Sorry, we know Camilla is saying don't see Harry. We know William is saying don't see Harry. And now the courtiers are saying, oh, he's busy. Oh, like there might not be anything in the court circular, Brittany, but he's busy. You know, all of that, I believe, intends to make it very clear to Harry, you're not seeing your dad because of this drama.
Yes, and this is what Harry deserves. This is what Harry deserves. He has behaved deplorably the last couple of weeks. All of this drama could have been handled inside. And this is just a reflection of how Harry will take everything outside. He will make everything public. This is just another example of that because all of this could have been handled internally. We didn't really even need to know the details of Harry's plans. He could have announced it the day before. He wants to generate, I think, fervor and attention. And again, he wanted to use all of this as emotional blackmail to his father. And his father can't do anything about Harry's security situation. Ravik has determined that Harry, hey, we've looked at your case. The Met Police have looked at your case multiple times now. There's just no reason to extend protection to you. That has been a decision that Charles should not and cannot overrule. And Harry just needs to live with that. And that Harry has made all of this drama, all this chaos public is just a reflection of just kind of, I think, what a terrible son he is. What a terrible son. And so even though, again, I think Charles desperately wants to see and have a relationship with his grandchildren, at this point, why would you want to see Harry? Because Harry's going to bring all this mess from the last 2 weeks into this meeting with his father. He's going to share it on social media or in the public in one way or another. You just can't trust Harry. And I think that message has been really driven home in these last couple of days.
It has, Brittany. It is just worth looking at what Harry and Meghan are sort of briefing in terms of why we've ended up here. Because, of course, anyone sane looks at this and thinks, you blew this up yourself. So it is quite intriguing to try and get an understanding. We're going to get that understanding. Again, you know, I always like to explain because the personnel matter here. This understanding is coming from a woman called Victoria Ward. She is the deputy royal editor at the Daily Telegraph, but she's like the direct line from Prince Harry and Meghan into the Telegraph. So what she reports comes directly from their team. And she has put the case that he is understood to be liaising directly with the king, that the decisions between them are private. But even after all of this, Harry has still not ruled out the prospect of them travelling to Britain. Now, this seems to be, Brittany, because they have to film for Netflix, for their independent production company at Althorpe with the children ahead of the 30th anniversary of Princess Diana's death next year. Now, she reports that the Duke's schedule is not in doubt, but his family's private plans are uncertain. This was intended to be no normal return visit of the kind he had been making solo for several years. Instead, the Duke was bringing Archie and Lily in the fervent hope that he might orchestrate a long-awaited reunion with the king. Plus, of course, we have the two events with Meghan, the Invictus Countdown, which is on Friday, and also an event at the Royal Hospital in Chelsea this week, but that's in London, so it doesn't look like that is going to happen. But she says the security provision on which they had pinned their hopes was denied, leaving the Duke in a quandary, repeatedly changing his mind about the best course of action, who to bring with him and where to stay. So effectively, she is confirming this idea that Harry is having some type of breakdown over this in Portugal. One source said he had been promised safe passage in and out of the residence, which never materialised. That's in reference to Buckingham Palace. But the palace denied this was ever on the table. Regardless, alternative private accommodation was frantically being researched at the 11th hour. The Duke received multiple briefings last week from his private security team outlining his various travel options and the cost implications of each. That's really interesting too, because it shows, doesn't it, Brittany? Finances really matter here. I've been saying for the past week.
Finances are important.
Yeah, like this security thing, the reason they want the security is because they never want to have to pay for security again anywhere in the world. That's what this is about. They need to save that $3 million a year. But she says one of the plans was to stick to the original, to fly to London with his wife and children from Europe. They could have accepted the offer of a stay at a royal residence, and Meghan and Harry could have proceeded with their engagements as planned. Alternatively, the Duke could have flown in alone, followed by his wife and children a few days later. The third option was for the Duke to plough on with his work while the rest of his family remained in Europe. Given his ardent wish for his children to meet their grandfather, whom they have not seen for 4 years, this remains the least favoured option. And they do say that while he will be back in September, there's less chance of bringing the kids because they're at school. So next week, therefore, was his best chance, which prompted a tug of war between heart and head. And again, Brittany, it's like, look, she's got a job to do. She's presenting the side of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I will accept that. But this is not a tug of war between heart and head at all. Like, Harry has just been fed a whole load of nonsense that made him believe something that was never going to happen was possible, and it never was. So actually, this is a tug of war that he is having within his own head. And unfortunately, I think it's deeply, deeply embarrassing and unrecoverable for him now.
It really is, Dan. I don't know how you, as a business, have a relationship with Prince Harry, because this whole debacle playing out publicly, I mean, it's an embarrassment. This should not be this difficult at all. And that Harry apparently didn't really have any arrangements until the last minute in terms of where he'll stay and whatever. I mean, that just seems incredibly insane to me, because as a public figure like him, you would figure they at least have everything set up. And so if the security from the government comes online, then they can make changes that way. And if it doesn't, they already have their plans in place and they're good, right? But this instability in Harry, I think, reflects an emotional instability, a mental instability. This is not a well man. This is not a well man. And it's shocking that Meghan is allowing this to play out publicly, although it could, I guess, work to her benefit in a divorce, because we're basically seeing this guy have a public mental breakdown, and he seems to be believing all these delusions. He desperately wants his security to be covered because him and Meghan just don't have the finances really to keep up with it anymore. I think the finances are starting to really get strained for them. They're trying to figure out what to do. They hate paying for this security, but they're delusions. And I think, in my personal opinion, some of his security team may feed these delusions that he is in this extreme danger, which he really isn't.
Of course, because they want their 3 million buckaroonies.
Exactly. He can travel around the rest of the world, but he can't travel to London.
Colombia's fine, Brittany.
It's fine.
Nigeria, fine. Ukraine. He feels positively safe in Ukraine. 18 people just died in a drone attack last night. It's nuts.
Too dangerous. London, or just London particularly too dangerous. Not as if people from London can't easily travel to Birmingham. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Brittany, I'm just losing the plot because I'm like, sane people should not be taking this seriously.
Yes.
And I've warned what this is all about. You know, there was obviously a way. If Harry just really wanted to see the father, of course there was a way he could come in and see the king. He could do so completely privately. Let me just repeat, because lots of people at the back still don't seem to have understood. I'm looking at you, Chris Shipp. I'm looking at you, Cameron Walker. This is about money. Because if he gets the security, the Ravik-provided security in the United Kingdom, the British state, people like me, taxpayers like me, have to fund security for him to go to Colombia, for him to go to Ukraine, for him to go to Nigeria. That's how it works. Dan Wootton Outspoken is your no spin, no bias, no censorship outlet for independent news. We have no big tech backing or billionaires pulling my strings, but that does mean I need your support. So please hit subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe to Dan Wootton Outspoken on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's totally free, but allows me to continue my promise to always keep fighting for you.